Hey, good morning, Jacques. How are you?
I'm doing outstanding. I'm talking to Garth Brooks.
Entering his second year as the LSU head football coach.
It was the only way I could get a foot in the door.
Joined by the icon, Kim Mulkey. Ace Coach, great to see you.
Jacques Talk is sponsored by Cork's Cajun Fried Fish and Shrimp and Kuyon's Cajun Barbecue.
Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Jacques Talk. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving and have a great start to your holidays. Gordy Rush is nice enough to stop by and join us today. Gordy, great to see you.
Thank you, buddy.
Regular season finale, so to speak, a regular season recap. Gordy has got an up-close look, your sideline. Every game you're down there, right?
Right.
And you were down there as a player. Gordy, you're part of some of my first LSU football memories in the late 80s.
You're making us both seem right.
My first game was 87, LSU in Florida. Emmitt Smith was a freshman for the Gators.
Yep, I remember that. We lost.
No,
we won that. We won that there. I sat that year. We went and lost.
The next year was in Gainesville.
We lost in Gainesville. That was the first game played. Recover fumble in that game.
You did. You did. You were number 38, right?
I was 86 that year because I was a receiver. Todd Kinchin was hurt, and they moved me to receiver. And so we traveled with 5 receivers, and I was 31 as the rest of the way.
Got you. Now, you were at Purdue before that.
I was at Purdue my freshman year, right? Bad topic. Boilers not good this year, 1-11. Charlie Hannegriff is like sending me score updates from all day long Saturday.
Big guy that was Coach O's protection.
Brian Madden.
He was at Purdue also, right?
Right. So there were we laughed. There have been 3 players in LSU history that lettered at Purdue and then lettered at LSU. So you got the 2 hardest ones. The easiest one,
Danny Etling.
So we took a picture together.
Danny Etling, a very good quarterback. And this just crossed my mind today, just this off-the-wall stuff that Gordy didn't come here to hear. But I'm thinking about how many Rose Bowls has Purdue been to?
2. They went with Breeze, and then Bob Greasy went in '69, I believe. They had Leroy Keys and yeah. There's lots of pictures of that team because there weren't many. They had a good run. They were cradle quarterbacks for a while in the '80s. Jim Everett.
I was just thinking of Breeze.
Gary Danielson. They had a stretch of quarterbacks in the '60s from Greasy to Jim Everett and then Breeze eventually.
Yeah, because it just crossed my mind today. How many Rose Bowls has Purdue been to? How many Super Bowls have the Saints been to? And I'm thinking the common denominator is Drew Brees for both of them. At least he went to half of them. Two Rose Bowls?
2 Rose Bowls, they're 0-2,
Yeah. And here's another thing real quick. Your last year was 1990.
Right.
So 34 years like that. But I remember it was Mike Archer's last game in Tiger Stadium. You guys played Tulane.
That's right.
Goal line stand. To beat Tulane, 16-13.
Yep.
And who's carrying Mike Archer off the field?
Yeah, I enjoyed Mike. Mike was good people.
Yeah, he was a good guy.
I was going to go to Cornell, and some people that was friends with my dad asked me to go talk to Mike. And I had a really good all-star game as a senior, and they didn't offer me. LSU didn't offer me. So I went to Purdue, and they said, look, if things don't work out, let us know. So I came and talked, and so I walked on and sat a year because there was no transfer portal then. Yeah. And so I sat and played special teams all 3 years. They gave me a scholarship the last year. It was fun.
You played in the earthquake game as well. And what I'm thinking, excuse me, about Mike Archer is how much the coaching thing has changed. Because I remember my dad getting the phone calls in the afternoon. Put it on ESPN. Oh, they fired him. Oh, tough. And it was Mike Archer's press conference. He had a press conference when he got fired, and he was teary-eyed.
Yeah.
He said, "We leave here with our heads held high." And at that time when a guy gets fired, it's like, oh, you feel bad for him.
Right.
Today, with the SEC buyouts and everything, there's not a tear being shed for coaches getting fired. That's how much it's changed. I think I interviewed Archer during COVID, and I asked him what his highest salary was. It might have been $150,000 a year, something like that.
It was a different world. It goes back to you think about the numbers now. I remember when they started the Gridiron Club, and the idea was Jerry DiNardo was trying to raise an extra $100,000 so he could pay each one of his assistants an extra $5,000. So we've come a long way from there. That's when they started the Bayou Bash and the Gridiron Club.
Yeah. You missed that? You missed the Bayou Bash?
Yeah, that was fun. That was fun. It was a good day, right?
It was an interesting thing. I mean, a lot of people enjoyed it. I had an uncle of mine who was a pretty serious guy who was like, these people just drink beer all day, and this is an excuse to skip work and all that, which I guess it was. But that was every February 5th, 6th, 7th, something like that.
First Wednesday in February, National Signing Day.
Yeah.
And everybody took the day off. I remember moved it around a couple places, the River Center. Before that, it was at the old Argosy, the Catfish Town.
Yeah.
And so good times.
Charles Hannegriff introduced me there one year. They asked me to introduce Coach Miles at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It was his first year in 2005. I don't think I'd ever spoken in front of that many people before. It's like 5,000 people staring back at me. And I think when Hannegriff brought me up earlier in the day, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the greatest sportscaster ever from North Vermilion High School, Jacques Doucet."
Nice.
So I guess I'm the only one from North Vermilion High School. But we closed the book on the regular season for LSU, and it was a night in Tiger Stadium, which LSU really drilled Oklahoma, played well. You leave campus. It was a healthy crowd. It was a pretty good crowd in Tiger Stadium. But, man, when we left and went to our car, that was the most quiet the campus has been all year long. We got right back to the station. I drove right home. It was kind of like, the heat of Vegas in the season opener.
Right.
And now the cold of winter setting in as it just flies by and it's gone.
It was a strange weather season. I mean, you go back to it was hot in Vegas. I was played indoor, but even at night it was so hot out there. I remember the South Carolina game in Columbia. It was supposed to rain and came out in my rain gear, and all of a sudden I'm just dripping bullets. Wound up being a 4-hour game because they replayed every play, it seemed like, and it was hot then.
Yeah.
Of course, UCLA was 130 on the field or whatever it was, and so it was a lot of different conditions. It was just a long, crazy, different sort of season. And the last week, when you have people that you have upsets all over the place, welcome to the new age of college football.
Yeah, going into the year, Gordy, it was hard for me to get a grip on what this year was going to be. I was like, well, I think the ceiling might be 10-2, make a playoff, but then the floor could be, 6-6. And this team, they excelled at times. The Ole Miss win at home, the South Carolina game on the road, and then other times they did not look very competitive in the second half against Texas A&M, the Alabama home game, Florida game, which I guess now people are talking about. Had they won the Florida game, they would have been in the SEC championship game.
Yep.
That's crazy to think about. So 8-4, when you go back and look at LSU history and you get to 8-4 in 2024, that's not a banner season. They'll play in a bowl game, and there might be some interesting things out there with the bowl. I'd like to get your take on how you feel about bowls these days after it's now a 12-team playoff.
Right.
I mean, it was interesting back when you were a player.
Yeah, it was big. It was a big deal, and everybody played, and it was just the bowls, right? And the national championship went through the whole bowl system. So it's different now. Look, I'm still for it because I think that you get all the bowl practice, I think, which is really important for your younger kids. So it's like an extra spring practice. And then, most of the times it's a good trip. It's a reward for the kids to go out and see different places. And you like to go to a warm weather destination or something that's fun. So more times than not, the bowl's a good thing.
And motivation, too. Has it changed that much? Because, for example, 87, Tommy Hodson, Wendell Davis, all those guys, they decided we're going to win a bowl game. We hadn't won a bowl game in whatever years. LSU was bad in bowl games. They were bad at the end with McClendon, Arnsparger, Stovall, and they went and beat a very good South Carolina team, handily, finished in the top 5. Then the next year, the late Ruffin Rodrigue, God bless his soul, I remember telling me, we didn't care, man. We're all getting sunburned at the beach, and Syracuse kind of had their way.
Well, what was disappointing about that game was a good Syracuse team. I mean, Moose Johnson was on that team. That was a really, really good team. We were tied for the SEC championship, and they took Auburn to play in the Sugar Bowl instead of Florida State because back then the Sugar Bowl didn't want LSU. They wanted the tourism money, and now it's obviously different because the LSU people come for a weekend and spend a lot of money on tailgates. So back then, it was a big deal. So Auburn wound up playing Florida State in the Sugar Bowl that year.
And you beat Auburn head-to-head, obviously, in the Earthquake game.
Right.
I remember being ticked off about that as a kid. I brought that up to Tommy Hodson one day, and he's like, "Oh, well, we didn't want to go to New Orleans. We always go to New Orleans, but the Sugar Bowl, pretty prestigious game."
Well, it was a bigger bowl. I mean, absolutely bigger bowl than the Hall of Fame Bowl, and to play in New Orleans. But I think, most of the kids, were from the New Orleans area back then. I mean, to go back. wasn't big to them, but I think it was a bigger game in stature. And so we had the non-conference loss, right? We were 8-3
Ohio
that season.
State.
Ohio State, yeah.
Yeah.
We lost up there and should have won that game. We were up 33-20 late and didn't close that thing out. So Auburn was higher rated, and that's why they took them.
Yeah. That was the I think my parents took me as my 10th birthday or something, 11th birthday when y'all played Miami.
Yes.
In the rain.
Yeah, that's right. We lost those games. Yeah, Miami was really good. And that was a 44-3 game. That was bad.
That was, once again, Ruffin Rodriguez said we moved the ball up and down the field. We just couldn't score any points. And he did have a point. I was at that game the first half. You guys were moving it, but then it was a monsoon, couldn't kick field goals, couldn't score. It was...
Yeah, so Ruffin Rodriguez got quoted, and back in the day, USA Today had they had the quote of the day, right? And so Ruffin made it twice. That one, he got quoted for saying in the press afterwards that we dominated the line of scrimmage, losing 44-3. And then the other one is he called Tulane the Columbia of the South. So
that's pretty good.
Yeah. So Ruffin making friends.
Yeah, we miss Ruffin. I remember one of the he was on the radio, I guess in 2018.
Yeah.
After Alabama came in and beat LSU 29-0.
Yeah.
And he said that the team just exerted way too much energy on the walk down the hill. Like they were all getting fired up and pumping their fists and everything. When the game started, they were just flat. So
I was watching the Jamie Howard interception game, LSU Auburn. We were living in the same house, and he was on the couch. And he threw that last interception, and I thought Ruffin, literally, he dove at the TV, and if he could have dove through the TV, he would have made the tackle. I mean, he was pretty passionate about the Tigers.
This is the way the conversation is going to go. Bit of history, bit of the present. But I saw Lynn Amadee the other day in the Pastime Pizza across the way.
Yep.
LSU great, but he was the offensive coordinator calling those plays for Jamie
was.
back then. And there was a piece of me after maybe I had a few beers that wanted to go up and say, why did you keep passing the ball that day?
I think he gets that question.
Does he? You think so? All these years later, that's 1994. That's 30 years ago. Huh?
That's a while.
Yeah.
30 years ago. It seems like, remember Phil Bennett was a defensive coordinator who was losing his mind because the defense played great that game.
We got video of the team walking off the field, and I think we got a shot of Phil Bennett where it literally looked like he's about to bite through his lower lip.
Yeah.
Like he just cannot believe y'all had lost that game, and I couldn't either.
No.
You could have run the fullback and punted every
Could have kneeled.
and won the game.
Could have knelt and got out.
Oh, my goodness. All right, so how do I transition back to the present?
right.
So LSU goes 8-4 regular season. That's not what they paid Brian Kelly $10 million a year to do. And after the game, Brian Kelly's got this dry sense of humor where sometimes it's like, are you being halfway serious, halfway joking? But he said, we're keeping receipts, which that's not for an expense report like we've got to do when we have to a hotel and
Same.
food. Keeping receipts is kind of a lingo that's come up in the last 5 years, meaning we're going to remember all the negative things that were said about us, and we're
Right.
going to throw them back in your face at the national championship, which he said. So interesting comments. He's been a little defensive after the Vanderbilt game, after the Oklahoma game about indictments against the program and stuff like that. What do you make of all that?
Well, it's life in the SEC. And, I mean, the first 2 years, I think the team's overachieved, truthfully.
Yeah.
And obviously Daniels, turns out to be a pretty special player. And I think this is the first time maybe they underachieved expectations. I think that combined with what I'll call is the new SEC, right? I don't think there's an era of 12-0 or 11-1 is much harder now. I mean, Texas went 11-1, and I think Texas A&M was their toughest opponent they played on the schedule, and they benefited from that. But a lot of 10-2, 9-3, and 8-4 teams. I think everybody, to me, the net win is going to go down one in just the way that it is. And but you look at it, LSU fans are disappointed. Alabama fans are disappointed right now. Ole Miss fans, right, are disappointed. A&M, it's year one, but there's some disappointment because they were sitting a little bit, in the catbird seat. Georgia fans aren't thrilled with 10-2. They are playing in the SEC championship, but they're not used to that.
Right.
And went to overtime to beat Georgia Tech. And then you have some people that Florida and South Carolina, obviously, folks are happy, but can they sustain it? And that's, I think that the 16-team SEC in this day and age of transfer portal, and I look up and I see Alabama's not 3 deep on the defensive line, and they don't look like Alabama and struggle to stop run. And then Georgia doesn't have a running game when they have 10 starting running backs in the NFL. That's all about the transfer portal, and the great teams don't have the depth they once did. And I think everybody's is trying to fill some holes, and it's just there's no great teams anymore. There's no bad teams. Yeah. We were never in an era when Vanderbilt got their 2 best players came from New Mexico State, and so they were pretty good this year. And even Mississippi State wasn't awful. They played a lot of young people, and I know their record was awful. And so I think it's a lot, more parity, a lot more competitive than it's been in the past.
And the team LSU just played, Oklahoma, one of the biggest name brands in college football. It's funny, we have season tickets, and the Vanderbilt, each ticket is stickered the price. The Vanderbilt ticket was stickered at $50, and the Oklahoma was $110.
Yep.
It shows you, the name brand, Oklahoma coming here for the first time. I talked to people who rent, Airbnbs and whatnot, and said this was the most packed they ever were, because I think a lot of people from Oklahoma made that trip because they'd never been here before. But LSU played them in the 2003 national championship. They played them in the 2019 playoff, and here they're sitting 6-6 and lost a number of their last games, and certainly didn't look like a great team the other night.
Yeah, you made a change on offense, and they decided not to. Dylan Gabriel left. They didn't feel like he was the future. They went with Jackson Arnold, and offensively they were a mess. And put them in that position. Obviously, there's another fan base that's not happy. So my whole point is you have all these people that were used to being at this level, and somebody's got to lose. The math doesn't work out anymore. And unfortunately for LSU, there are a couple games that they didn't close out Florida when they dominated time of possession, disappeared in the second half against Texas A&M, and much better team than USC. I mean, to see where USC wound up fell, and you had 3 disappointing losses. Now, 2 of them are on the road. And to me, it's much tougher now with everybody being even to win on the road in the SEC. But 3 losses, I think LSU fans look back and said, hey, we should have won that.
Well, and we talked about this last week, 2011, for example, when LSU and Alabama are two juggernauts, clearly above everybody else. And the difference back then is that guys that were, like you said, 3rd on the depth chart, they couldn't leave. And if they did, they're playing at McNeese or Northwestern State or whatever. Now they can go basically wherever they want to.
I remember the SEC championship in Brian Kelly's first year. Jane Daniels took LSU right down the field on that bum ankle. And after the 5th play, Georgia put in 6 new people on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah,
I mean, LSU played with 2 defensive tackles the whole season, and you just don't see those numbers. You're right; those people transfer. It's not the same, and Nick Saban would just stock offensive and defensive linemen, and Georgia would do the same. It's not that like that anymore.
Garrett Nussmeier, so he starts a season for the first time, start to finish. Ends up with 3,700 yards passing, 26 touchdowns. We knew he was going to throw more interceptions than Jaden Daniels. Anybody is. Jaden threw 4 all of last year. He was surgical. Garrett, that's the way he plays.
Right.
You're going to get some touchdowns. You're going to get some picks. He threw 11 interceptions. The scuttlebutt, the word is that he's going to come back next year. That's not official. We don't know. We asked him after the game. He said he wasn't ready to comment on that. He did say he was going to play in this bowl game, whatever it is, no matter what. So everyone's looking at Joe Burrow, 2018 to 2019. Jaden Daniels, 2022 to 2023. What can Garrett Nussmeier be 24 to 25?
Well, look, I think keep in mind his dad's Doug Nussmeier's an NFL coach. And I think that, one, if it was my kid, I would want him to come back and play more football. He hasn't played a whole lot of football. Okay, so you have that. But also I would want to know, okay, LSU's got a lot of question marks on offense, right? Offensive line.
Right.
What are you doing at the wide receiver position? You feel good about what's going on the running back. And then, I think what's been interesting and the biggest thing on this offensive side of the football is you had 2 new coordinators that I think were kind of learning their identity together. And I think at times, to me, it got complicated. They kind of strayed a little bit too much into a passing and got away from the run. But at the end of the year, you saw them start to figure it out a little bit. There was more balance in the offense. I thought they ran with a little bit more tempo and simplified things. And the last 2 games, it started to click. And, and so if I'm Doug and this is my kid, I want to have that conversation. All right, after going through this experience, this first year, who do we want to be going forward? Is that we're going with more of the same here? Because there were some times against Texas A&M, And certainly against Alabama and Texas A&M in the second half, when they got one-dimensional, and A&M was just teeing off on Nussmeier. And so that's not good for anybody. So, I think he's got first-round skill set, and the NFL is desperate for quarterbacks because either you got a quarterback or you don't have a quarterback in that league. I still think it's in his best interest to come back.
Yeah. I mean, if I can point at one play that kind of turned the season, it's A&M second half. They're up 17-7. That third down, he's rolling to his left. He throws to his right. A&M picks it off. They run it back to like the LSU 10. They put in Marcel Reed. He gets a snap, runs it right in the end zone. The whole place is going nuts, and the whole thing just flipped right there. And to your point also, I felt even in the Florida game, LSU was running the ball pretty well with Josh Williams and these runs to the outside, these kind of stretch runs. They were getting a lot of yardage. They just didn't score any points. Didn't score enough points.
Yeah. No, the offense had a chance. They had a chance to put A&M away, right? And they didn't do so.
Special
and
teams
they got
were
one
bad.
dimension. Yeah, and they got one-dimensional. But, I'm not – also take a step back, and I'm realistic too. I mean, you won 2 games that you weren't the better team on that given day with South Carolina
I'm glad you
and Ole
said
Miss, right? I mean, I think that's all part of what's new. And, and that you have that parity. Home field means a lot. Home field meant a lot at that Ole Miss game, right? Yeah. And then you got the break at South Carolina that Sellers got hurt, but that's part of the game, and you work with that. I think the offense evolved, and I felt comfortable the last 2 games what they were doing. They simplified the playbook. They went quicker from center. I don't think they overthought it. And certainly they had been missing the vertical stretch, and they got that the last game out of Hilton, and even that big play to Pimpton. That at least if I said, this is what the offense is going to be going forward, and Nussmeier is going to be the quarterback, okay, I feel comfortable with that. That's what it needs to be.
Yeah, and rewind real quick to what you talked about. The Ole Miss game, Trey Harris drops a bomb right off the bat. LSU stops them on a 4th and goal early on. They missed a field goal. I mean, there was like 13, 17 points right off the bat. They didn't score, and that's football. That's the way it goes. And then the South Carolina game in particular, Nussmeier throws the interception late, and it's a pick 6. But one of the South Carolina guys hits Nussmeier, and that brings it back. And if he runs that thing back, it's a double-digit game with not much time left.
Look, I thought Ole Miss was the best team that
LSU played?
LSU's best win. I thought Ole Miss from top to bottom was the best team that LSU played. The problem with Ole Miss is that LSU caught them. It was their 7th game in a row. They didn't have the bye. LSU was coming off a bye. LSU was fresh. I thought Ole Miss was beat up. They were tired. And sometimes just you watch LSU, to me, you watch Ole Miss, and to me, Lane gets stuck in things and loses his way. Nobody scripts the first couple series better than Lane Kiffin, and then it just evolves in the stuff sometimes. And but when they're healthy and that defense, that was the first time Ole Miss looked like a SEC defense, and I thought Pete Golding did a nice job with them.
The receivers that he threw to this year, I don't think you can tell me if you agree or not, but I couldn't point at any of those guys and say he's the number 1.
No.
It was a collection of guys.
You can make an argument that maybe Lacey was the number 1 guy. Here's to me, you didn't have the stretch guy. You had Lacey and you had Daniels that were really similar big possession receivers. And then you had 2 slot guys in Anderson and Thomas that both did the same things. You wanted to get the ball to him quick in space. I thought Anderson at times, over-delivered. The times that he was able to go down the field. But we're not used to here at LSU not having somebody 6'4" that can run 4.4 and just go get the ball the way Hilton did in the last game. And so what happened to LSU is that, if I can see it, certainly these coaches can see it, that teams were coming up and pressing and challenging LSU to go over the top, even with Nussmeier's arm strength. And they didn't believe that the wide receivers could get separation over the top. And that's why they kept trying to throw the ball to Hilton and eventually caught some in this last game. And I think that was the one thing. I think it was a good group. It wasn't the great group. It wasn't the best group. Yep. I mean, some of them still have football to play. But last year you had 2 guys that could take the top off of a defense, and Neighbors and Thomas, and that's why they went when they did.
Well, that's what Brian Kelly said in the postgame press conference the other night. He said defenses had been sitting on us,
right,
and we haven't had the stretch. And late last year, 2023, you saw Chris Hilton in the bowl game catch a touchdown, catch a long bomb that set up the game-winning score against Wisconsin. And this year, you don't get him at his best until the final game of the year.
I think Chris just needs to play football. And, and so Chris obviously is a great track guy in high school. And then Zachary, heck, they could run a hitch and they could run a go. And it was nice to see his progression last year, especially in bowl week. He could run all the routes. I think he just needs to play football, and I think he'll be fine and should have a breakout season next year.
Yeah, back in August, he looked spectacular, and then doesn't play for a long time. Kyron Lacey had 866 yards, 9 touchdowns. At UL Lafayette, he did not put up big numbers, and he came here. So, I think that's a great testament to him. He came here from a smaller school with some doubts, and I think he had trouble with his self-confidence early from what I heard from Coach Kelly, but he proved he could be an SEC player. And then Aaron Anderson, I think, had 12 catches for 59 yards last year. This year, 53 catches, 784, 5 touchdowns, and oh, by the way, the biggest play of the game the other night, the 100-yard kickoff return against the Sooners.
Yeah, I think both Anderson and Thomas give you a lot of options. And now that you've seen them on paper, the ability to – you want to get the ball to him in space. I love what Thomas brings to the run game, especially if Nussmeier is the quarterback. If you want to run some of those zone reads, you can run it off reverse motion. I think he keeps defenses honest. If he can touch the ball once or twice as a running back, I think it's a good change of pace. So I'm excited about that. Look, I think if Daniels comes back and Hilton can step up and continue to play that way, and some of these young guys come in and have support, then that's a good group of receivers for Nussmeier.
C.J. Daniels got about half of what he got at Liberty. He was a 1,000-yard receiver there. He had 480 this year on 42 catches. He did not have a touchdown, although he had a touchdown called back at Florida on a pass interference thing with Lacey.
Which was a good call.
It was a good call.
It was a good call. I was right there in the end zone. I'm like, and Lacey was celebrating, and he almost got hit by 3 flags, but they were all deserved. Yeah.
They tried to get him in the end zone against the Sooners the other night late, and Nuss just threw it behind him. It was like here in the heading towards the north end zone. We talked about it before we came on. Mason Taylor is interesting. It seemed like he didn't catch as many passes late in the year as he did in the beginning. I don't know if the defenses neutralized him or what, but obviously we'd like to see him come back, but we know who his father is, and we know that he's going to be an NFL player somewhere.
I would guess from what I've read, he's a second-day pick, right? And so the first thing I would know about if I'm Taylor is Nussmeier coming back, because that whole fits, right? I would want to – I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back with a veteran quarterback. Look, I think the things for Mason, obviously, is a fantastic receiver. I think he's a good inline blocker. I don't think he's exceptional per se. And I'd be interested that he could certainly go out. I think he's like I said, a second round pick from that. Or could he come back, get a little stronger, get a little faster, put up some more numbers, and come back and play with Nussmeier? They obviously have a great relationship. Be interesting to see if they both stay.
Will Campbell's going to leave.
Should.
Emory Jones, we're hearing he may come back.
I've heard some discussions where this is just scuttlebutt, right? And that maybe is he a right tackle in the league? Is his feet good enough, or he's such a bulldozing run blocker, or do they want to see him as a guard? Yeah. Does he come back and does he get a look-see in guard? So he's a fantastic offensive lineman, but he's got a decision to make, and is LSU willing to cooperate there?
Miles Frazier and Garrett Dellinger have both exhausted their eligibility. They're gone. I agree with what Charlie's been saying on your postgame show, that LSU's going to have to hit the portal and get some offensive linemen.
Well, yeah, we haven't seen a whole lot of, seen Bo Bordelon at tight end. Only saw a little bit of Kyrie Adams. He got hurt in pregame warm-ups, came back and filled in a couple times. So the concern is if Nussmeier comes back, who's your left tackle?
Yeah.
Right. Who's going to take care of his blind side? Mubanga played some, obviously made some strides. Chester returns there. If you get Jones back, potentially, maybe one or two guys. We'll see.
Yeah. Durham certainly I don't think a lot of people thought before the year Caden Durham was going to be your leading rusher.
No.
And he was. Caleb Jackson, can't get him on the field. That's kind of interesting. Got all the physical tools, right? But, like, I agree. When Brian Kelly said it the other day, I totally agreed. He said, oh, Caleb Jackson runs over 2 guys last year, and people are saying give him the Heisman. You know, these people are tweeting, make him the starter now. Well, there's a little more to it, and he's just a green player, right?
He's played football. Then, you guys do a great job with high school sports. Didn't play his senior year at Liberty, right? And or maybe a game or two, and has played limited in spots. I've seen him run track, 100 meters. He's fantastic. He's a tremendous athlete. He needs to play football. And I think what you worry about in this day and age with this offense is pass protection's huge with the amount of people that are coming after you. And you want to make sure, one, that he's on the same page with the quarterback. Is he staying in? Or, as we saw the last 2 or 3 weeks, LSU start checking the ball down on the running backs. They made a lot of plays.
Yeah. On the defensive side of the ball, it just broke as we were coming out here that Harold Perkins has entered the transfer portal. I heard rumors about, they're trying to get him to go to Texas or whatever, but he can always come back. He can take his name out.
Right.
So I don't know if this is highest bidder type stuff or what, but.
Well, I mean, a couple questions with Perkins. One, how's he going to be after the rehab?
Yeah.
And number two, still becomes the issue. Where do you put him on the football field? Mm-hmm. And the freshman year, the LSU fans got used to him being on that right defensive end or on the defensive end. He was opposite B.J. Ojulari, who always drew numbers, and they had a real good defensive line. And I think he surprised a lot of people. And then as the season went on, people did 2 things. Offensive coordinators would run the football right at him because he was 205 pounds, so he's light to play defensive end. Or they would just put 2 or 3 wides out and go force him into coverage. And so he got schemed off the field his freshman year, and people really didn't want to realize that. So the natural move, and from what I understand, his camp wanted him as well, was to inside linebacker. Obviously it was a mess last year, and he struggled with it. I thought he made some good strides. I thought he made some really nice strides this year until he got hurt, and they finally put him over into that will linebacker spot after they put Weeks on the field at the Sam. And so they not the Sam, but the Star is what they call it.
Whatever
the
you
strong
say,
safety,
Gordy.
right? They switched sides, and he was much more comfortable when he got hurt.
Yeah.
And then I think that if I'm LSU and I look at it right now, and I'm not trying to be sour milk, here, but Keys was pretty darn good. Devon Keys was really good down the stretch, and he's a 3-down player, right? He really did well handling the run, and then you have Weeks there. And so my biggest question for Harold Perkins, who's a tremendous athlete, wish him nothing but the best. He was fantastic for LSU. Is what is I'm interested to see where he goes, if he goes somewhere, and what position does he play?
Yeah. Because he didn't have a sack in the time he was in the game this year.
He reminded me of Isaiah Simmons, who played for Clemson, and he was incredible. Brett Venables, ironically, was the defensive coordinator for Clemson, and did a lot of great things with him. And we got to Arizona Cardinals, took him, I think, with the 10th pick, and they couldn't find a place to play him. And that's the thing in the NFL. At 220, you're not on the line of scrimmage in the NFL. And he got up to 220. So the question is, where do you put him, and what's the natural position for him?
Yeah. I'll tell you real quick a funny Tommy Moffitt story.
Yeah.
Interviewed Tommy a year ago, and he said, I just can't sit in the stands and watch a game. And I said, yeah, why is that? He goes, well, I went to one of the games in 2022.
Yeah.
And he said, some guy behind me, the whole game is yelling, put Harold Perkins in the game, put Harold Perkins in the game. And I looked down, and he was in the game. So he just, I can't go up there and hear some of this shouting and stuff all around me.
That's a good Tommy Moffitt, by the way.
I try to do some impressions here and there.
My kids we went to go run in the Junior Olympics. It was in College Station in August, so I spent a day with him over there. And of course, the facilities are unbelievable.
Yeah.
And just Gordy, they got 3 of these. So he's a great match over there with Elko, Mike Elko. Those two fit well.
when he was talking about when Saban first came to LSU and Saban wanted to change all the facilities. He said, it'd be like going to McDonald's and getting your hamburger here, and then you got to drive 15 minutes to go get your shake, and then drive 10 minutes to get your fries, because that's how Saban described, we have to practice here, or the stadium's over here, we can't, we got to shower here and there, and those are all the things that Saban.
Oh, he's a lifer, man. He's in a great spot. I'm happy he's back in the game.
It is kind of like Nolan Kane when he was wearing A&M, or Corey Raymond where he's wearing Gator blue and orange. It's kind of like an out of body. You shouldn't be wearing that.
No. It doesn't look right at all. I mean, I remember seeing Corey, in the coaching profession. He's a year younger than me. He's all gray,
Yeah,
I was like, that'll do it to you.
Those
coaching
defensive backs,
right? I'm still keeping my hair a little bit, but I mean, he has a gray beard, kind of looking like a grandpa. So.
Obi-Wan.
Yep.
I think one of the first pictures they tweeted of Corey, he looked like a hostage in Gainesville. He did not want to be, he just didn't want to be there. I mean, I know he did his best and everything, and Billy Napier might turn it around there. We'll see.
Well,
momentum.
I thought Billy did a great job. Obviously, the game we saw a little bit against Georgia, but they were physical and they looked like a Napier, what he did at UL. I mean, and Lagway's incredible.
He's got a quarterback.
He is special, but he's even going to be more special. Went back and looked at his film. He's from Willis High School right there in Conroe. Unbelievable. And then I caught a ride with Rob Sale. I was on the alumni bus.
I heard you say that.
Yeah, it was. He pulled up in the truck. I had to walk. I was with the LSU Alumni Association. And he said, I'll give you a ride. And we went like 30 yards. But anyway, because of the traffic. And he said, man, look, Lagway, as good as a player is, he's a better person.
Yeah, well, here's the funny thing. I heard you tell that story.
Yeah.
Darren and I are standing outside of the swamp.
Okay.
We had just called an Uber.
Yeah.
And there's this pickup pulls up and said, hey, you guys need a ride. It was Rob Sale.
Yeah.
We could all been in the same truck.
I mean, we could have filmed it. What a story! We could have done the podcast from Florida.
And I hadn't seen him for years, so at first I kind of stared. I'm like, "Who is that?" And then, Rob Sale, offensive lineman for
good guy.
What year was he on the 03?
Yeah, Rob was
national championship, or was he? I gotta look that up. I gotta remember. He was Saban.
Yes,
early Saban.
No, he was Saban. Boy, you got me thinking.
Yeah,
he and Brandon Landry and all them were the same era.
Yeah. Yeah, great dude. He had coached with Napier, with the Cajuns, too. He coached at Alabama,
Arizona
right?
State.
Okay.
So Rob went to Alabama.
Yeah.
And then with the Arizona State, with Napier was the OC over there with, I think, was Herm. Might have been with Herm Edwards over there.
Uh-huh.
And then Rob did break away and go up to the New York Giants for a year. And then when Billy got the job at Florida, he came back down.
Gotcha. A few more things with you. Appreciate all your time.
Sure.
Defensively, LSU's going to lose some big names, right? Braden Swinson, Savion Jones, Greg Penn III, outstanding young man. But Whit Weeks has become a rock star.
Right.
Now he still sometimes doesn't steal the edge and do some things right. I mean, he's a young player, but
right.
But he's SEC Player of the Week. I'm seeing it's
3 times. Yes.
17 tackles.
Yep.
He had 18 against Ole Miss. So he's an outstanding player. Love talking to his dad, who played at Georgia and played with like Mike Bobo, Will Muschamp, Kirby.
Yeah,
all played.
All 90. Yeah, my senior year we played and beat Georgia here, and then Muschamp and all of them were 91, 92 right after. Yeah.
I remember that 90.
Yeah,
because y'all had a losing season in '89, and this was like this big season opener. Jacques Doucet mowing grass in Milton, Louisiana, daydreaming about that season opener against Georgia.
Yep, beat Georgia.
76,751. My useless info in the head.
It's okay.
Opening drive, Saul Graves to Marcus Carter for the touchdown.
Carter. That's right, from Mansfield.
Yeah, and you missed the extra point.
That's right. We did, but it was a it was a good start. That was a disappointing year. That Vanderbilt game just kind of turned everything on its head. And it's so hard to play at Vanderbilt. 11 a.m. We're out there yawning, and we laid a turd at Vanderbilt and shouldn't have lost that game.
It was a Hail Mary from Chad Lute to Todd Kinchin, and I thought you guys had won the game, and they called a push-off.
Yeah, this was awful. It was a ticky-tack call.
Unbelievable.
Ticky-tack call.
So not only does the touchdown come off the board, you don't even get to run another play. That's it. Game's over.
Yep.
And but then the next week, one of my favorite games in LSU history was the A&M game.
That's right.
Todd Kinchin, 3rd and 9 or whatever, catches a little 2-yarder from Chad Loop in the flat and zigzags his way all the way for a touchdown. I was literally in the sky, jumping up and down in the north end zone.
It's a great game. And then he had the punt return. I remember blocking on that thing. He had the punt return for a touchdown in that game as well, too.
But yeah, Odell Beckham's dad killed somebody or nearly killed a man.
Odell Beckham's dad, Odell Sr. would hit you.
Yeah.
He would hit you. He from West Texas. He was a baller.
Yeah. Yeah, 1990. Y'all started, I think, 4-2 and then finished 5-6. Yeah. That was a Harvey Williams against Kentucky, 224 yards rushing. I was there that night.
No, Harvey was special. He was a good player.
Personality, too. He should have been playing today.
Harvey's good people. I saw him, I think, last year.
So defensively, Blake Baker, they were better than last year.
Right.
Last year was historically bad. We know that. But I think Blake, Bo Davis, Corey, they've got the coaches.
Yeah, if the staff and the scheme were solid, I think it was, obviously it was a year of figuring out what you've got and what you wanted to do. I thought Bo did an incredible job with a bunch of,
because the
transfers
D-line,
and freshmen.
Yeah, I mean, not to interrupt you, we thought that was going to be a disaster, and they really weren't.
They were good. I thought they were good. The edge players Peoples did a great job. Look, I think they got to get better at safety, and they just need, and they had too many busts, and people were picking on the safeties. I thought the corners played corners played fantastic. Alexander's and Stamps. I thought they did an excellent job. It was the middle of the football field. It was a combination of the nature of that defense. You blitz so much. And so if you're going to blitz, and they know you're going to blitz, they want to replace where the blitzer comes from, so it's a running back or tight end. And there were just too many missed assignments in the middle of the football field, whether it was the edge, bad pursuit lanes. They've got to get better safety play, whether it's out of the guys that return or wherever you go for it. But they got to get better there.
All right, I have two topics to close out on.
Yep.
All right, NIL and Bryce Underwood. Mm-hmm. I thought a good point was made by a caller to Charlie's show after the. Where is the responsibility of the adults to not put a teenager in a position where there's so much pressure on him to perform? And, 50, Bryce Underwood, 16, 17 years old, whatever he is, and he's getting all this money. He doesn't know any better. I mean, certainly he's got generational wealth. He may not have to work ever again if he saves it, but that's a lot of pressure on a kid.
My first year at Purdue, Jeff George was a big name, and he came from Indianapolis, and he didn't have to live in the same dorms as everyone else, and he had a house and, or whatever. And, there was some regret for that. And there's nothing wrong with Jeff. He was fine, but it didn't work out. He wound up transferring to Illinois after that. Same sort of thing. If you're not going to – how are your teammates going to deal with you if you're the one at $12.5 million? There's more pressure on you to run every gasser, to touch every line, to not to be late. And, how do you, in a team sport, commit to them that, hey, I'm really a part of this team. So all of it, I think, is fascinating just to see how this all plays out.
Well, Tommy Hodson, big man on campus, Hollywood good looks, all that, told me that back then I got a car for like a week or two. I couldn't pay for it. I had to give it back.
Right.
Me and Ruffin and everybody would go to Burger King or McDonald's Dollar Day because we didn't have any money to really eat and everything. So obviously that is the extreme that never – Trev Falk told me that he became friends with Lionel Tiger Thomas because he had a car and could drive him back and forth to Lafayette. Yep. So that's not what we want. But we also don't want extortion and we don't want to create animals.
Right. I'll never forget Bo Davis. I remember we're going to the I was going to eat. It was a Friday after practice.
You're a player?
We were a player. So Bo would have been 2 years younger than me, and Bo asked me, he said, hey, can you give me a ride? Yeah, Bo, where do you need to go? I said, Meridian. I got plans tonight. I mean, and I think just to understand, some of the spots. I'm all for paying kids, right? I think it's about we got to put caps on it. I mean, this is NFL even has salary caps, and not to put some caps, make it manageable, and where you get the guy from Oracle step in, it's just going to throw this sort of money around. I'm going to be fascinated to see what the Underwood years look like at Michigan, because guess what? All the pressure's on that kid now.
Yeah.
All the pressure in the world's on that kid.
And it's not supposed to be pay-per play. They've been saying that from the get-go. He's supposed to do something in return for it. What's he going to do in return for it?
No.
And I've talked to the Gordon McKernans, and they say, we give them pretty simple things to do. Post an Instagram picture, tweet this, and sometimes they don't do it. And then they scrub it later. They delete it, and so there you go. All right. The uniform. the LSU uniform.
Yeah.
So for years, Jerry DiNardo fights, right, to get the white jerseys back, gold pants, gold helmet. We've got the best uniform in college football. We're not Oregon. We don't change our uniform every week. And this year, look, I don't feel really emotional about it, or I don't want to complain about it, but I just think it's interesting that Greg Stringfellow and all them for years, we don't touch the uniform. I mean, even when they put somebody's like initials who had passed away on they would have to send out a big press release just letting you, hey, we're not making any big changes. Mm-hmm. So this year they wore all white 2 weeks in a row. They wore the mustards against Vanderbilt. They wore the purple with white pants. So they wore like 6 different uniforms this year. I
like the traditional uniforms. Not enough to start up, to start up World War III, and I'm not as I've heard some commentary out there, and I'm not interested in getting into war on social media. I get the Oregon. I like the Oregon thing. I mean, Oregon's original uniforms back in the day when I played, they were awful. They had the U of O helmet and the green and yellow. They had to trick something up to do it. And so I get that some of the players want to do that. I'd like to see less variance. That would be me.
Yeah, because it's kind of like going to Lutcher Quarterback Club. Gordy, you ever been to Lutcher Quarterback
Club? Yeah, been to
Lutcher
Quarterback. Been to St. Charles Catholic. I love the Quarterback Club.
So every week at Lutcher Quarterback, they never change that menu.
No.
Dirty rice, baked chicken, salad, French bread.
Yep.
And it's awesome every time. No need to change it.
No.
So, I mean, you played in a time wherein the home jersey was purple.
Purple, that's right.
Purple, gold pants, gold helmet.
Yep.
And then when you were on the road, you wore white.
We wore white on the road, yeah.
So
that was, that's what I remembered. But I'm with you. The traditional stuff just looks good. I want to turn on the TV. I want to turn on the TV and know who I'm watching. I mean, I saw the Oregon-Washington game and did like a triple take to figure out who was who. Once I love what Army-Navy does. I think that's cool. Rivalry game. They have all the traditional uniforms, and they really wear some cool stuff for that game.
Moscona feels very strongly about it. There's some others that say, what are we doing? There's an old saying, right? Recruiting the universe, like everything. Why don't they play the band more? Why are they piping in that NBA young boy? Well, the recruits like it and the players like it.
I caught some more crap for that when everybody was like, let the band play, let the band play. Let me tell you what. There's stadiums that, like Mississippi State, and we hadn't been back there in a while. Mississippi State was as loud as any stadium, with half the capacity that Tiger Stadium has, because of the sound system.
Yeah,
and it's gone where it is, and it's gone. That's where the game has gone. And I get it, people that like the traditional thing, but it's a factor. And I think home advantage. South Carolina was ridiculous. I don't ever remember Williams-Brice Stadium being in that category. It was really, really well. And we played a day.
Right.
I remember telling Texas A&M sideline reporter, we're going to play, after they beat us, we're going to play Williams-Brice at night. I said, good luck with that. That place is ridiculous. Yeah. And it was.
Yeah. And A&M, it's kind of a funny contrast. Yeah. All the guys had the short hair and they're in these but then they played that techno club music.
Oh, I know.
And they're jumping up and down to it.
All the stadiums. Look, I think we got the same money. Everybody's got the lights. Everybody's got the sound. Everywhere's tough to play in this league. And again, I think home, to me, and I'm not, the midday show handles the odds. So I think it's a 6 or 7 point swing, 5 to 7 points, home field advantage now, because everything else is equal. Yeah. And so playing at home can be a difference maker.
All right. Well, we look forward to the bowl game. There's talk of LSU playing TCU or maybe Dave Aranda in the Texas Bowl.
I think it's Houston, just looking at the scenarios, and we'll see if a fourth SEC team gets in. But LSU's been to Florida so much. They played in Florida. LSU goes to Nashville next year to play Vanderbilt. Houston's kind of the natural fit, and so Texas Bowl is my guess.
I have said, and I still stand by it, outside of your national championship games, your playoff game against Oklahoma, maybe that Sugar Bowl, Rohan, and then Jamarcus against Notre Dame, that Texas Bowl at the end of 15 was the most hopping atmosphere I've seen for a bowl game.
It was fun.
Texas Tech had Patrick Mahomes. LSU had Leonard Fournette. The place was sold out. Texas Tech brought their fans. It was on fire.
And my favorite story, you'll enjoy it. It was an 8 o'clock kickoff, right? and they had a slide on it. I think
About
we
8
started at
o'clock
8:45, right? I'll come with 2 stories for you. So I'm waiting for the LSU bus to come. And it's supposed to come 2 hours before kickoff, right?
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, Les didn't want to leave the hotel like early, and they had all of the people on the committee dressed up with cowboy hats and long things and boots that stood for 45 minutes waiting for Les in the buses. And I'm dying laughing, saying, we'll tell them we're going to get there. We'll get there whenever the hell we get there. So, yeah, that. And then that was Jim Hawthorne's last game.
It was, yeah.
And I'll never forget, we have to get the audio for you. Somebody's got the audio. Jim Nickel has the audio, where it's a Texas tradition after, is it the first score, they throw tortillas on the field.
That's right.
And whatever, he just went, but I have no idea, but the Texas Tech fans have just thrown debris all over the field. I said, Jim, those are tortillas. And why would they do that? I said, it's a tradition to throw food on the field. And so it was a great exchange.
Bob, when you have a fajita, you're supposed to put some sour cream and some guacamole. Why would you throw it on the field?
Why would people go and get tortillas? It was just, he didn't understand that concept.
And then did Doug say, well, Jim, it's your tradition at Texas Tech?
We'll get the audio for you, but it was a good moment.
I hope Doug is doing well. We missed him this year as
we
well.
did too.
And we missed Dan Bornay as well. Hopefully they're both recovering and they'll be back soon enough. Great conversation. Really enjoyed
Good to see
it.
you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Gordy. And thanks for stopping by Jacques Talk. We will see you next time around.